Wellness isn't black and white, so why should your choices be? On High Energy Life, we dig into nutrition, health, and science with an open mind, inspiring you to make choices that actually work for you. Our mantra? Embrace nuance, ask questions, and always reserve the right to change your mind. Now enjoy today's episode. I'm your host, Carly.
And I'm your host, Alex.
If you could just start out with a little bit of a background about your evolution into regenerative farming and what that looked like and why you decided to do that.
Ours was a pretty crazy one. I'm kind of like, I'm not sure how many generations, but at least 6 generations here in Canada farming. So we were here before Canada. So both sides of my family cleared the land, from the Queen and all that kind of stuff. So I was pretty entrenched in the system, I would call it. And so I grew up, we grew up with sort of dairy farming with my grandfather, but he had a farming accident when I was pretty young and died. So, and my dad was more keen to do cash crop, and we had already started doing cash crop farming. So was kind of my upbringing to high school point. And then, but then I went off to school and did engineering. So, my parents were like, there's no future in farming, and, go do engineering and go get a job. And I met my wife, and we were working, basically in the city. I mean, she has a degree in economics, and I had my engineering. So we were working for big companies. And after our first one was born, we were like, I'm not sure this life really fits us, and I'm not sure we really want to raise kids this way. So we started looking for some land, and we eventually found some land that was pretty played out, I guess. And it was in pretty rough shape, but it was kind of our dream to live there. And when we were walking the fields with our first kid, her eyes were just as big as saucers, like she hadn't seen a field or grass or things like that. And it was like, okay, we need to do this for her. And so we got this farm, and it took us about probably 10 years to even just get the land cleared enough that it could be farmed. And I still had that older mentality of let's cash crop it and put corn and beans and wheat on it and go from there. And my wife just kind of gently nudged me along all the time. She wanted to raise her own chickens, and we kind of got in an argument over that I said, well, you can buy chickens cheaper than you can raise them. And that didn't really matter to her. So she raised her own chickens. She had her own potatoes, and you started to really see the difference, the taste difference. And it was kind of shocking to me how different the food we were growing ourselves. I mean, I had kind of grown up with it, and she had as well. She used to go up to the neighborhood farm, and they would get some milk from the farm and meat from the farm and process it in their garage. She grew up. They came from Poland, so they kind of grew up in communism. Dorothy was born here, but both her parents had grown up in communism, so they did everything themselves. So we had both had that background, and even me, like my other grandfather had kind of a mixed farm, and so we always had access to homegrown, like our own farm raised cattle and pigs and eggs and big gardens and stuff. So we knew what food was supposed to taste like. And then when we started growing our own food, we started to remember, hey, this tastes like our childhood food. It doesn't taste like what we're buying in the grocery store. And that just kept, we just kind of organically kept moving along with that. And then I got kind of sick for a while, started to have a lot of health issues. And then we started to really realize that the food that we had grown and cooked ourselves, I didn't get sick. If Dorothy cooked it and it was bought from the grocery store, it was like 50-50, if I ate at a restaurant, it was like 90% chance I was going to get sick. So,
Do you mind if I ask
yep, yep.
what kind of symptoms you were experiencing?
I have like I didn't even realize it at the time. Like I did, it got to the point where you didn't realize that you were coping. Like you don't realize that you were sick until after. So like now, like 20 years later, I'm realizing that when they changed the Canada Food Guide when I was in my teens, early teens, my family embraced it like no tomorrow. This is when they changed it in the 80s. And they said, we need to stop eating saturated fats and switch to margarine and, vegetable oils. And we needed to just to do all that. And my family embraced that like crazy. I remember like my dad just, we're never eating butter again. And because he was all happy about it because he grew soybeans. And so, we switched. And within now I'm starting to realize that I was sick back then. It instantly changed things for me. So we switched to margarine, and within a couple years, I had a circulation disorder, Raynaud's, and then I had a lot of skin issues, and they just blamed that. And like every time, there was always like an excuse. It was like, oh, that's just because you're getting older, or though it's because you're hard on your body, or that's because you work hard, or I started to have like skin issues. Oh, you work in a cheese factory, you're gonna have eczema and psoriasis and stuff like that. And then when I was 18, they said, oh, you can have knee replacements.
Wow,
And
18.
yeah,
Wow.
and he's like, well, you had a hard life, you're really hard on your body with farming and hockey and everything else. And thankfully my surgeon said to me, he said, well, if you can hold off as long as you can, because you can only really do this once or twice in your life. So if you can hold off. So I went through college and stuff like that, and I started to have all kinds of other issues. So then what really turned it on was when I turned 34. I had basically worn my body out. My back, I have 4 herniated discs, and then related, and then like all kinds of autoimmune issues too, where like I can't, I have trouble digesting things. Things make me sick. It's painful to digest, all those kind of things, and so it just kept. Then you started to worry about when you're having children at that point. We had 4 little kids, and we're like, okay, so if this made me sick after 10 or 15 years, what's it doing to my children and my children's development? So then that's where we really started to started to read a lot of books, really started focusing on nutrition, like being nutritionists like you guys. My wife has said she that's one career path that she would actually love to explore.
Well, it's never too late.
Uh,
Neither of us,
now
set out
because
with the intention of doing this, yet here we are.
what we've learned is incredible, but you're always fighting this, paid government narrative that's, these companies are actively working against us. Like, once I read some of these books, like one of the first books I started with was because I was going to the farmers markets at this point with our products, and so we hadn't heard of Joel Salatin or Alan Savory or any of these people before. And so we started meeting people at the farmers market, and they started dropping these names. And so we started researching everything we could think of. And, so one of the first books I read was called The Dorito Effect.
Ah, great book.
And,
That was
and
actually one of
that
my
one,
gateway books too.
I actually struggled to read that book when I first read it. I read it. I I read it while I was actually sleeping out with my chickens. So the first year we raised chickens on a large scale where we had 5,000 birds out on pasture at once. I actually slept out with them every night, and the dog and I would go out there every night. So I was reading books every night, and listening to my chickens and making sure everything was okay. And because we just didn't know in this space what was going to happen when we put this many animals out on pasture. Was it some kind of smorgasbord for the local wildlife, right? And so and nobody was really doing it the way we were doing it, and we didn't know any peers and didn't have a lot of information, so we just kind of figured everything out on our own. And the Dorito effect was one where it was like, I read, I think, about a third of the book. I got about a third into the book, and I got so mad, I just had to put it down. Like, it was making me really upset learning, that basically I had been lied to. And the book is full of appendices and data and research and examples, and so it took me a while. I read it for a couple days, and then I set it down, and then I had to pick it back up 2 or 3 weeks later, and then finish reading it because it made me so upset reading it. And when you start reading some of those books, and then Nina Teicholz was the other book that's really been a good one,
author.
The Big Fat Surprise. That one's it's full of data, and it's like you just have to put two and two together yourself. And then even
Yeah,
in the
both.
last couple of years, I've really moved towards like the carnivore diet, and you start looking into that more, and you just realize how much you've been lied to over your life about health and nutrition. It's shocking.
Yeah, both of those books are on our recommended list to read for clients that we work with.
Yeah, I have
Yeah, and so
multiple
you're
copies, and I think I've loaned them all out.
yeah, good reads for everybody. But yeah, so your health story, it really hits home for us because when you tell it, it sounds exceptional in a very unfortunate way. But when we're
Yeah,
working
it's
with
maddening when
clients,
you look back.
but it really honestly is an extremely common story. I mean, and when you mention that you didn't even realize how unwell you were until you were feeling better, that is
Yeah.
half of what our work is trying to convince people that you don't understand how good you could feel until you experience, because
Because they've
uh,
normalized feeling like shit. They've
absolutely.
normalized, that, oh, you're just getting older. That's why you got all these aches and pains. Oh, you're just getting older. Or you work too hard, or you did this, or you did that. Like, that when I went for my surgery when I was 34 in 2011, they my surgeon made the comment to me. He said, "When I got your MRI, I thought you were a 70-year-old man who had a hard life."
Wow.
And then when I realized you were 34, he's like, they told me it was a 2-year waiting list to have surgery. I got surgery in a couple of weeks because my surgeon felt so bad for me. So, and had I had better nutrition, the 15 years previous, I would have never had surgery. I would have needed surgery. And so thankfully my surgeon was good. He says, I'm only going to do the bare minimum to get you back and going. And then thankfully, through nutrition, I've been able to heal myself otherwise.
Yeah, that's
But
amazing. So with the surgery, obviously that's a pretty invasive medical procedure. But
well, I
outside
had
of that,
discectomy in my back. So they removed some of my discs.
okay, yeah, that's a
They
pretty
were
significant.
blown out so bad, and then they were healed around the vertebrae, and then they were hung up on my nerves and pulling on my nerves. So the pain was next level. And so what he was able to do was just relieve that pieces of the disc that were pulling on the nerves, and he didn't do a full like. He said if I was older, he would have just fused it all up. Because I was younger, he wanted to try to, allow me to sort of heal it on my own, or maybe the technology would get better, he thought. But what I've found is just really it's nutrition, like has really come a long way to making me feel better.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're speaking our language, but I do think that highlights that something that's missing in, obviously we're in the sphere of health primarily through nutrition, but a lot of, I'll call them influencers in this space, fully discount the benefits that the medical system has, and I don't believe that should be the case. Where obviously you had some extremely beneficial surgery done to help you heal, and then you also use nutrition as one of the core modes of healing.
Yeah, I was too
But
far gone. Like lots of people are like, "Oh, I'd never get the surgery." I mean, I couldn't stay conscious in a day. So like the pain was to the level of like I would lose consciousness. And, so like you can't function. And it took like 6 months for the medical establishment to figure out what was going on either. But,
So
it's,
would you say that, I mean, your interest in nutrition with regards to your poor health events that were happening, would you say that was a motivator in starting your farm? Or was that
oh
not
yeah,
really
for
part of
sure.
it?
And it's also the moral compass that we run by now. And it's the reason that we can't cut corners and, but it comes down to I don't really care about myself as much as I care about my kids. So my point is I don't want my kids to go through the same chain of events that I went through. I will make sure that they understand the nutrition differences and why they feel like they feel after they eat certain items, or and so they have more of a long-term success, because I lost 15 years of my life. I wasn't able to play with my children. I wasn't able to kick a ball around the yard, or I was kind of miserable too. So even my wife, it's to her credit too, putting up with me, because I was pretty miserable when you're in that much pain all the time. So, I kind of am a little bit bitter about it, because, I feel like I lost a lot of my life, and purely because I followed the recommended guidelines that were put out by the government.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so just to circle back, we're really big on education, and we work with people of all walks of life, but a number of them do have kids. And it can be really hard sometimes to get them to be interested in this. It's hard to see that when you're a child. So what are some things that have worked for you in getting your kids interested in nutrition and and understanding that importance?
For me, it's lead by example. So if your kids see you working hard, if your kids see you caring about something, if your kids see you getting better, um, they're going to be inspired by that. They're going to follow that. I mean, kids are going to be kids, and I've read the book The Fourth Turning, and that kind of explains how your kids are essentially rebels, and they're going to be little rebels, and they're going to think that their parents are nuts and they don't necessarily know better. But at the end of the day, they'll come around. I mean, my one kid, she's 21 now, and she's starting to really start to ask the questions and come back and understand, the importance of things. And she's starting to see, when she eats the food at university, she feels like crap, but then she's been able to find a local farmer's market to get food, and it makes a big difference in her life. And so, they come back and they start asking more questions, and, you let them a little more in on your life. You keep it at their level for their age, and just keep moving along. But, you got to lead by example. And your kids, you got to do what you say, and if you don't do that, then they're not gonna take you seriously.
Yeah, whether they show it or not, they're definitely learning all the time from from the people in their lives. So when you started looking for land and eventually purchased the land you're at now, did you have a goal to sell the food that you were producing, or was it purely
No,
just your own
no,
interest
no.
and
We just
hopefully you
wanted
get
to
some
get out of
food?
town and raise our kids in the country, and maybe grow some of our own food and a little bit. But we had no aspirations of selling to anybody, or at that point, I
Did you
still
have a
thought
goal of
that.
becoming a regenerative farm, or was that even
No,
something
I
that
didn't
you
even know
thought?
what it was. Didn't even. We never really did know what it was till maybe even a few years ago. We just realized that we were already in that space. Kind of happened upon it organically. We just It made more sense. When we started to do certain things that benefited the soil, and it seemed to contradict what I had learned. Like one of the things I had learned when I was younger was like, oh, you need to kill every weed, because that weed, if you don't kill it, it's going to come back even worse the next year. And what I've actually figured out is that weed's growing in that place because it's remediating the soil in a certain way. And it doesn't come back the next year because it remediated the soil in a different way, and a different plant grows there the next year. So you need to kind of look at Mother Nature and see how she does things, and just keep mimicking and watching and seeing, and but the biggest one is getting the animals on the land. Like, that's one thing that's been missing in agriculture, and we've been getting rid of it in agriculture for basically my lifetime. And getting animals back on the land, I think, is paramount to the future of humanity.
Yeah, I
Awesome.
think as coaches, we very much have to listen to our clients' preferences, and many of our clients want. I mean, you mentioned carnivore. Many of our clients want to eat much more heavy on the animal product side, and
Yeah.
many skew more plant based. But one thing that I think is very much missing in the conversation, especially when you get towards vegetarian and veganism, is the lack of understanding that regardless of what food choices you make, the animals on the land are absolutely necessary for the sustainability of.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
actually, I
so
wanted to kind of back it up a little bit. So, just for our listeners who may not have heard the term regenerative, can you just define the term in your own words, the regenerative farming?
we kind of stay away from it. We stay away from the word because I feel that it's been co-opted by the corporations now. I think it's kind of a meaningless word anymore. We more get into explaining what we do and how we do it. Dorothy and I will explain that we use all our animals interact with the soil. We move frequently every day. Like if we give the example of our chickens move to a new piece of soil every day. That's lush and full of grasses, and then they don't come back to that piece of soil for 365 days. So we use a real intensive pasture management system to rebuild our soil, and every year the soil gets better. So to me, a regenerative system is something that brings in very little outside inputs and can sustain itself forever, and it should be improving. So one of the examples with our farm is, we used to produce after we got the land cleared and we cropped it for a few years, we were producing around 1,500 pounds of forage per acre. We never planted a seed. We never sprayed a chemical. We didn't add any inorganic fertilizer. We didn't do any of those kind of things. All we did was started incorporating the animals back onto the land, and we started doing that in a very intense way. After about 3 or 4 years, we were producing about 10,000 pounds of forage per acre. And that's just with getting the animals back in the soil, waking up the soil, getting all the different microorganisms working in the soil. And to me, that's regenerative. When you're starting that, the cows are eating the grass and then they're feeding the grass again with their manure. So that's a
So for
regenerative system.
For most of us who are not farmers, what does forage mean? Because I think you said, was it 10?
Like
You
grasses,
started with.
basically your grasses and your legumes, those kind of things.
Okay, so you
Any kind of
started when you.
plant-based matter that the animals would consume.
Okay, so you started when you got the land and you started harvesting. You were producing. You said 1,500
About around
pounds
1,500 pounds per acre
per acre, and now it's
of forage.
10,000.
Yep.
Wow.
So,
That's
and in
incredible.
how many years was that?
After about 4 years, we started to see that kind of a result, and now we've been doing it at that level. We've been for about 8 or 9 years now.
Okay, so it's leveled off now, but you're pretty constant at that
I would
10,000.
say it increases a little bit, and it still changes a little bit every year. So we'll get different grasses growing predominantly in a year, depending on the weather and the climate, but even just the soil's changing a little bit. We don't have When we originally planted, we had a lot of alfalfa in our field. We don't have so much of that anymore. We have a lot more clover now and some really nice grasses that have grown on their own. Like the soil is full of seeds, and you kind of wake that up when you start incorporating the animals onto the soil again. So it's really interesting to me to see all the different plants that grow on our fields now, and we never planted any of those plants. They were in the soil from probably centuries.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So cool.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. Just the few sentences that you said that I do want to unpack. But the first thing is one of the arguments against regenerative, if we can use that term, agriculture versus conventional is coming at least from Monsanto and large industry is just the density of calories on a monocropped corn, wheat, soy field, and that that's the only way to feed the population. So I don't know if you've personally run numbers, but so just based
He
on
starts
So,
laughing.
so I think that's just
world.
a, it's great. I would love to have that argument with them because one, I would even argue that what they produce is food, because if I just go and eat a bunch of soybeans out of the field, I don't feel too good. If I try to eat field corn, I would pretty near puke. You can't, like, it doesn't like, people think that corn is corn. Like when we eat sweet corn, that's a completely different plant than field corn that is grown. Um, so those items all have to be processed to turn into something that resembles a food-like substance. And so it has to go through some type of factory and some type of major process to turn into some type of usable calories for humans. What I can do with my land is my animals directly turn what nature provides into meat protein. And with a very simple process, I don't need a factory to modify that meat or anything. I can, put it on the grill and consume it. And those calories that we're consuming, they are very nutrient dense that nourish my body very well. I mean, we can digest, like, I've heard numbers of over 90% of a meat protein, and a plant protein you might be in the 10% range. So it's a completely different calorie argument. So with our land, what we've been able to do, like last year, a simple little 50-acre farm, we were able to produce 200,000 pounds of meat off of our farm. That's a lot of calories for a lot of humans. So when you produce, like, say if you did a cash cropping operation, you might say you're doing corn or wheat's a good one, you'd only gross around between $500 and $1,000 an acre, and your expenses would be nearly that as well. So you might profit $100 an acre. With our meat-based system, because I'm producing 10,000 pounds of forage, I'm producing about 2,000 pounds of meat an acre. With if you're using the example of cattle, so I'm doing 2,000 pounds of meat an acre. At $10 a pound, that's $20,000 an acre. So I would argue that my system is far more productive, and I didn't have to bring in any inputs from around the world. I didn't have to bring in inorganic fertilizer what people don't understand is the fertilizer they use to get those plants to grow is made from oil. So you're putting oil on your land to grow your plants. You have to spray chemicals to keep being able to grow the crop you want to grow. Where me, I can just basically use what's here and available. So by managing how the livestock is grazed on the land or operated on the land, then I can harvest the crops I need to make to make that happen. I don't have to bring in things from outside. So that's
Oh no, go ahead.
that's where this system has a real problem, though, too. I didn't dump a whole bunch of money into a bunch of outside corporations that have profit for lobbyists for government to create regulations and promote that system. The problem with my system is all the profit is here on my farm within my system. So there's not a lot of profit. So there's not a lot of money outside my system to lobby for me. So there's a whole bunch of little farmers making a bit of money, but there's no big lobbyist groups for us because we aren't making big corporations money. So it's a very difficult system to perpetuate when you're trying to get the public to accept it.
That's really interesting. Now, I was just going to ask, your animals are 100% forage based, which I've heard the argument that for a lot of farms that's not possible because it's too arid or it's too cold. But you're in Canada, it's really cold and snowy. So how are you able to do that all winter long without bringing in outside food? And
It
like,
doesn't
why
get
aren't
much
more farms
colder
doing
and it
that?
doesn't get much snowier than where we are. I mean,
Exactly. So why
it
aren't
might
more
get
people doing it the way you
it
are?
might get a little colder, but we certainly have a very short season. So our season here, if you were to pasture the animals on the land, you might get them out the kind of the golden rule here is the third week of May, and usually sometime in September we see a frost, so that stops the plants from growing. So you have a very short window to actually pasture the animals on the land. So we have to really rush and get everything done in a short period of time. But what we're able to do is we harvest the hays over the summer and store them, and then we feed them over the winter. But the reason that they argue that system doesn't work is basically based upon the commodity-based systems where they want to see a return on their money very quickly. So they only grow a cow, say they get them in at 900 pounds and they finish them out to 15 or 1600 pounds. They can do that in an 8 or 9 month period. And, if they push them with grains, then they can grow them a lot faster and quicker. When you do it on a system like ours, we're just basically doing everything from start to finish. So a cow for us can take up to 3 years to finish. And we never really will get to those 16 or 1800 pound weights on forage. You're not going to put the fat on your carcasses the way they do. But I would argue a lot of that fat really shouldn't be there. So
Yeah,
it's
actually,
just
a question on that, because what we've heard is that the consumer prefers the fattier cuts of
The
a
marbling.
corn finished beef product.
Yeah,
Because
and-
obviously is that something that you've noticed yourself when you were selling
So
your?
when we first started, I was actually kind of prioritizing more lean meats. I thought that was better because that was the old mentality. And then now, since going more carnivore, I realized that, we want to have a fattier meat cut because it's the fats that are the fuel for our bodies. And so we do need those fats, but it doesn't need to be excessive. Like on the pork. Yeah. So like on the pork, when you see a commercial pig, they'll have like a 4-inch slab of fat on the back of their
Yeah.
carcass, and where ours will have maybe a 1-inch amount of fat on the back of them. It's just, we still get marbling in our beef. We still get fat in our beef. It's just not what maybe somebody might like as far as having excessive fat, but we really focus on trying to get, the omega-3s up in our meats. So that's always been the focus of my farm. I believe that the meats that are available in the grocery store are devoid of omega-3s and CLAs. So that's always been the focus of our farm, was to try to get that ratio better, and then so that you feel more saturated. And so, I eat carnivore, so you can't, if you don't have enough fat in your diet on carnivore and you're eating too much protein, it doesn't work. It's a system.
Protein's
that
not
doesn't-
fuel. It's a
Yeah,
building
it
block,
doesn't
but it's
it
not
doesn't
fuel.
work. You'll get sick really quickly. So we've been focusing on making sure that we have enough fat on our carcasses, and to be honest, it hasn't been a problem. And for me, I definitely don't like the corn-fed beef. Like I don't. I find it very bland and tasteless. I don't find it satiating. We have a very strong corn-fed beef program here in Ontario that basically all the farmers participate in. So I'm very familiar. Like you can basically only buy corn-fed beef here. There isn't a lot of other product available. I don't want to cut up on other farmers too much. I think everybody should be free to do what they want, and I just want the consumer to have the choice. So I don't want to beat up on other farmers too much. If people prefer that taste, then all the power to them. I'm not gonna try to limit that product, but I would caution them to try our meat and then compare, and just compare how you feel afterwards. Because something like I read in these carnivore diet guys, like a lot of them are eating 2 pounds of ground beef and a dozen eggs a day. I'm a decent sized guy, and I cannot eat more than about a half a pound of ground beef and 3 eggs. Because I feel stuffed, like
Yeah.
really full.
Nutrient density right there. It's the power.
It's the nutrient density of our food is completely different.
Yeah, and
So
that gets back to even just talking about number of calories that you can grow. I mean, they're just even a different calories from a processed corn is way different than calories from nutrient dense beef.
Have you ever tested your products compared to like a conventional product before in terms of nutrient density, like in a lab?
Yeah, so when we started this, we're the only ones doing it here. So we needed to be able to show that our product was something different, and it actually was important to do. So we would get our chickens tested. The big one that we got into was chickens because it's very expensive to get into chicken here in Canada. You can't just go out and buy chickens. You need a license to do it. So we got into a program, and we paid about $1 million for a license to be able to grow 25,000 chickens. And so we needed to make sure to know that what we were doing was something truly different. So when we built our pasture-based system, we after our first year, we went and got our chickens tested. So I grabbed a chicken off a grocery store shelf and grabbed one of the chickens out of our freezer and sent it off to a lab. And $2,000 later, I get the results, and it's completely different nutrition profile. So then we started doing that about every other year. And every time we tested one in the grocery store, we tested all the different labels, so RWA, organic, or conventional, and they all tested the same. They have the same nutritional profile. There's really no difference between any of them in the grocery store. The organic chicken, the only thing that really tested different was it was a leaner bird, but it wasn't, it still had the same ratios of omega-6 to 3s. It still had the same protein, the same calories, the same fats. I mean, it was basically the same. But our chickens were testing substantially different. And the cool thing to me was when we first started, we weren't feeding a feed that was really any different than the commercial system. We were using a regular feed mill, and we were basically using the same feed as what they would use in the commercial system. But our birds were testing completely different.
In what ways?
So omega-3s was the big one. So our omega-3s are up to 300% or 3,000% higher than the birds in the store. Our ratios, the ratios recently now that we're working with, we're down to around a 6.5 to 1 ratio of 6 to 3s on our chicken, which a commercial birds are in excess of 25. Even corn-fed beef test in excess of 25 to 1. So, our chicken's testing higher than beef. Our protein is higher, about 10% higher. Our calories are about 20% lower. Just all the good fats are higher. All the bad fats are lower. Iron, our chickens test fairly high in iron, and the commercial system, we couldn't find a trace of iron in the chickens because they don't go outside. So they weren't interacting with the soil. They have no source of iron. Calcium was another one that really stuck out. We had a lot higher calcium. We attribute that to them eating some of the legumes, the clovers and the alfalfas in our fields, because we don't specifically feed any of those minerals. So it's interesting to us to see that difference. So it was really interesting just to see that there's a massive difference. And then the most recent nutrition test we did on our chickens was, I kind of gave up on the grocery store stuff because it always was just testing the same, and it was costing me $700 or $800 to get one of those birds tested. So I started testing my own chickens against my own chickens, and we now make our own feed. So I did 2 different batches of chicken, one with an omega-3 enhanced feed where it had peas and flaxseed that was dry extruded added to the feed. And it was a company that, they sell this feed all over the world to add to your feed to get those omega-3 enhanced meats and eggs that you see in the stores, and actually milk too. And so they've done the nutrition test to show that it works for them. And what I actually found was it didn't make a difference. And so the hypothesis was our chickens are probably maxing out on the amount of greenery and omega-3s that they can consume already with our pastures, and that they don't really benefit from having an omega-3 enhanced feed. So we've found that through our own research that the environment that the animal in is far more important than anything, basically.
So would
So
you say that
we
you
really
genuinely save
prioritize that.
money then? Because the environment is just existing as it is. So if they're getting what they need from the land and you don't have to buy the supplements in their feed, like would you argue that, the way you're doing things is cheaper in the long run?
Yeah. So that's where I love numbers, I love math, I love all those things. So I have spreadsheets that would blow your mind, but there
I'm sure Alex would love to see those.
we love numbers here. So I have all kinds of mathematical equations and tons of data points and all these kind of things. And one of the cool things that's really neat with our system is, and we shouldn't be able to do it, is we actually exceed the feed conversion ratio that a commercial farm would get. So a commercial farm has they kind of target different feed conversion ratios based on what they're feeding them, and we can actually exceed that because our animals go outside, and so they're able to supplement some of their diet from what they're finding in the pastures. And because we have fairly lush pastures, they get a lot out of those pastures. So it's really neat to see that. And we shouldn't be able to actually get anywhere as close to the commercial feed conversion ratios because our animals, we don't really provide them much heat. And so what an animal has to do to stay warm is they have to eat more energy. So you have to eat say more corn. Corn has a lot of energy in it. So they would have to eat a lot more corn to stay warm because their body needs to produce more heat so that they can stay warm enough to live. Where in a commercial system, they just heat the barn so that they don't waste the food that they eat on energy. They convert that into a meat protein instead of wasting that. So it's cheaper to heat a barn with propane than it is to feed them more feed. But in our system, we want the birds to kind of mimic the natural environment as much as possible. So when they're out on pasture, there's no supplemental heat in their system. So they would have to eat more to stay warm. But in our system, because they're gaining so much extra forage from the pastures, we're able to compete with the commercial system on a cost basis on how healthy our birds are and our end result. Where we lose the efficiency is on the processing side of things. So
Actually that
that
um,
that's
kind of
where it
leads me
hurts
to
us.
my next question. So are there any easy solutions or cost-cutting solutions that you've specifically chosen not to use because they conflict with your personal value system and how you define regenerative farming?
Yeah, so there's tons of them. Like the list is basically endless, and
Okay, just give us like the top three.
well, so like easy ones are like, the grass-fed one is kind of, there's lots of grass-fed standards out there and all these different associations that want to certify you as grass-fed. And, grass-fed in their systems only means like a lot of them are like, oh, as long as the cow is on pasture when you had pasture available, or as long as their feed ration didn't exceed, 25% grains. Where our system, we're 100% forage. I don't even try that. And we have tried it. Like I thought, oh, we can buy pigs from people that are already started and then we'll finish them on our system and we'll end up with a great meat. It actually didn't work. So we butchered the pigs and the meat tasted totally different and it didn't work, and we ended up feeding it to the dogs. It wasn't a
Like, what do
product
you mean it didn't work?
the meat just didn't taste the same as when it went through our system from start to finish. So we could cut corners by having another farmer, grow those pigs for a little bit, and then we finish them, and it didn't work. The meat wasn't to the quality that we expected it to be at. Um, we could, if I wanted to cut corners, I could just say I was organic, but there's so many loopholes in the organic system, like that it's really not that much different than the conventional system. There's from a moral standpoint, I can't do it. For my own health and my kids' health, we just don't do it. It hurts us, but
Oh,
I would argue that it hurts your reputation more, which is more important to me.
yeah. So I definitely agree with you. I think that organic, though it's better than conventional, at least certainly on the pesticide front, I feel like the term regenerative kind of gets put at the top on a pedestal. But you mentioned earlier that you don't like to use that term because you feel like it's been
No,
co-opted.
because they've co-opted it now.
How so?
So like they'll say like a soy, like a regular grain cash crop farmer, they'll say that they're regenerative because they plant cover crops in between their rotations. So,
So you
they
feel
might
like
plant.
almost like they're doing the bare minimum. They're not really truly committed on like a moral level.
Well, I don't even see how it really is because, they can't even sustain their system for more than a few months the way they're doing it, where my system it's basically a closed loop system here. Like there's not a lot of outside inputs that we need to bring in to be able to do what we're doing, where, they can't survive without their chemicals or their fertilizer. If you don't have animals integrated into your system, there's no way that it can sustain itself forever. Without inorganic fertilizer, especially.
Yeah, yeah, and Carly especially has a lot of experience with the whole labeling system.
Yes, I just wrote a really long blog article.
And I mean, obviously we're coming from the U.S., but it sounds from what you're saying is Canada has a similar issue of whatever labels are put on or allowed to be put on a product. The way I approach it is I can only assume the bare minimum to qualify for that.
Well,
So given that, and in pretty much any labeling system has downsides and faults, do you have any recommendations for a consumer
Yes, I was
that
just gonna ask that.
whether regardless of if say their only access to food is at the grocery store versus even if they have a handful of local farms that they can choose from, how can a consumer approach the
Like yeah.
buying the
if
best
you're
quality?
buying in a store that has shareholders, I can guarantee you nothing in that store is worth buying.
What about
Like
okay, so like at a
it's
farmer's
that
market.
simple. I wouldn't base my family's health on anything in a supermarket that because they're beholden to shareholders, they're gonna cut corners, they work on central distribution models, so they can only deal with the largest companies. They can't deal with anybody local that's not in their system, and they can't do it that way. So, and the label, you guys actually have a lot stronger labeling regulations in the U.S. than we have in Canada. So you do have some help that way because your labels have to be approved by the USDA. We just have guidelines that our labels are allowed to be done under, and only if they're challenged through a complaint does the CFIA even look into it. So my advice has always been to know your farmer. You need to know where your food is actually coming from.
So actually
And
going to the farm, getting eyeballs
yeah,
yourself.
I would never do it. And I know it sounds terrible, but if you aren't doing that, you're just opening yourself up to to paying more for a product that doesn't really do any justice. Like in my mind, I would just rather buy the cheapest product in a grocery store than pay a premium price for something that's probably a lie. Um,
Yeah, we've been
or
hearing
some
stories
form of a
about
lie.
even at farmers markets, some farms will just get your run of the mill meat or vegetable and then they repackage it and they kind of sell it as
Yeah.
if it was their own. And it breaks my heart that they're doing that. That's not what those markets are supposed to be about. But
Yeah, the farmers markets have got bad for that.
yeah.
Definitely. If everything looks too perfect, it's probably
Yeah.
like that's your number one trigger is if things are perfect, or you can buy unlimited strip loin steak or unlimited bacon or unlimited chicken breast or all the vegetables are exact same size and shape. You're not buying natural. You're not buying from a regenerative system. we've even got away from selling. We don't really sell individual cuts or anything like that. We do it all in packages because our argument is you need to learn to eat the whole animal.
Yes, I love
So
that.
it
Do you have
needs
any
to be that
recommendations for people
type
who
of a
want to get
system.
started with that type of nose to tail eating? Because we're big proponents of that, and it can be really kind of intimidating if you're not used to eating that way. Kind of the ick factor sets in. So, do you have any recommendations for going down that path?
I mean, just work at it at your own pace. I mean, whatever you're comfortable with. I mean, I still struggle eating liver. So, I mean, I didn't grow up with it. My mother would boil it up for the dogs, and we didn't eat it. I mean, as much as we had the whole cow sitting in our freezer, we didn't eat the liver. So,
And what's
uh,
your favorite way to eat the liver? No.
I just mix it in with my ground beef because I usually eat, what I do is I usually fry up half a pound of ground beef with butter. I can mix a little bit of liver in with that, and then I throw some eggs in that, and I mix the eggs in. That's my meal for the day,
Nice.
and and then I add a little bit of cheese or something like that, or I might add maybe some kielbasa or some summer sausage for a little extra flavor, but. Um, ground beef is essentially using the whole animal. I mean, it's all the little pieces from all around the animal. So you're really getting into the nose to tail once you're just even consuming something like ground beef. So um, you just everybody's got to work with what they think works for them. They got to just work at it as you go. It's not something like even me. Like it's been a 15-year process and I'm still getting there. So, you know, and I'm still learning and I still don't know everything and I still am horrified to find out things every day and I still get duped every once in a while. And another good tip I would say to people is like if you do find a farm that you think, works for you is to Google map them. And you can if they don't show up on Google Maps for one, then they really aren't trying to sell to the public. And so they're probably not very proud of their own reputation. And the other thing is you can see from Google Maps if they're actually having pastures and rotations out there. Like when you look up my farm now on Google Maps, you see, the graduated little marks on the ground all the way around a 40-acre field. You see that I don't have massive barns on my farm. There's no 100,000 bird chicken houses here or anything like that, so
Yeah, so
it's
I've actually seen one of your images that you posted on X.
yeah.
I think it was a spring photo, an aerial view of the difference of shade of green of your fields versus your neighboring farmers' fields.
Oh yeah.
So I'm wondering, have any other local farmers in your area come to talk to you and be like, "Hey, what are you doing? How is your land so
Well,
much more
they
productive?"
came to talk to us
Or
when
do
we
they even
first
recognize that
started.
it's more productive?
When we first started, they came to our farm and they chewed my wife out how horrible we were and how we were ruining farming for everybody and that we were going to kill all our animals and what was some of their other arguments
Wow,
and it
ruining
was,
farming.
oh yeah, like it
Yes.
was like that's what I don't understand is I don't understand why they're so threatened. Like if you're in the conventional system, why would you be threatened by me? I'm just somebody different. I'm wanting to do my own thing and offer the customers that choice. I'm not sitting there advocating that you shouldn't exist or, that you're ruining farming. I think everybody should be free to choose whatever they like. But I think that should be a transparent choice, Don't try to hide what you're doing either. So if you're not proud of what you're doing, maybe you're not maybe doing things just 100%.
Yeah,
So,
do you have any theories on why they felt so threatened? Because for me,
Like you're not sharing the same subsidies or like support system. Like you're
well,
separate.
but
Like
if
no,
you're
they're
not able to
I
help.
can't even access their subsidies or their
Yeah.
insurance programs.
So why are
if
they so
Um,
threatened?
if they feel threatened, to me that would suggest at certain level they think that there's something superior about what you're doing.
Well, part of it is some of them are afraid to go back. So this is going back to farming maybe more like the 50s and the 60s, and it was a lot of work. And maybe some of them have some nightmares as children from having to work that way. But what we're able to do with new technologies, we're able to use some of the new technology. I mean, they didn't have skid steers back then. They didn't have the electrical technology that we have now. They didn't have internet and cameras, and they didn't have solar power, and Wi-Fi switches and all these little things that make our life a little easier. That wasn't available to them back then. Even plastics, some things that make your life a little bit easier weren't available to them back then. We didn't have round bales. I mean, we didn't have tractors with air conditioning. So, so if we go back to some of those thoughts of going back to, maybe we should be farming more like the 50s and 60s, but let's try to bring in some of this technology. I think that's maybe where some of it comes from. And because it is a little bit harder, it is a little bit more labor intensive. It's not the easiest thing to do. But I think the end results kind of speak for themselves. So to
Yeah,
answer
that's
your earlier question is, like, we have had farms now after we've been doing this for 10 or 15 years, and we haven't disappeared, and our land is more productive than it ever has. Yes, we have been approached now
More in
to
a
see about
positive way,
farming their
hopefully.
land more like ours. Yeah. But
yeah,
at
that's
first,
it's
it was, yeah, you guys are crazy, and you're going to kill everybody.
It's an interesting comment about the increase in labor, at least relative to how things were done in the past. But you mentioned employing technology, still farming the way that you are, and that's kind of the blend of kind of going back to a more holistic view while still employing certain technologies.
Yeah,
So
you don't
with,
have to go back to the dark ages.
with that, would you still say it is more labor intensive than conventional farming,
Oh
or
yeah,
is
for sure. I mean, I can farm 10,000 acres by myself with maybe a couple hired help at a couple different points in the season, and I could farm 10,000 acres of cash crops, no problem. I mean, I just need one big combine and a couple tractors and a couple big drills and a couple big sprayers, and I'm done. Like, it's not hard to farm 10,000 acres by myself, with a little bit of hired help. With
yeah?
a livestock operation, once you start involving livestock, they have their own brains. They can make their own decisions each day. If they want to, get out of the fence today or do something stupid, they can do that. And they need constant attention and constant monitoring. When I plant a soybean plant, it doesn't run away. It doesn't run in front of a car. It doesn't fly away. It doesn't do any of these kind of things. So it doesn't have to worry about a coyote killing it or something like that. So it is more labor intensive. I mean, you're not going to you could run I think a really small, really very productive operation would be like about 1,000 acres with a small team, but you would need that team 365 days a year. And it is what it is, it is more work. You need more farmers. I mean, we've lost 90% or more of the farming population in the last 20 years. So, we would have to get back to, 70s farmers populations. Not everybody wants to farm. So it's a little different.
It sounds like it is a very valid argument or consideration. But at the same time, I get the sense that there are more and more people that are looking to shift back towards understanding the value of being closer to nature, being closer to your food source. And yes, it is a lot of work, but especially given increases in productivity in other industries. And now obviously we have the rise of AI, that the productivity outside of our food system gives us more time. If we do it intelligently, gives more people the time and ability to refocus on producing high quality land or food in accordance with maintaining a sustainable environment.
Yeah, and that's where I really envy the US system. I think you guys are on the right path. I think it needs still some tweaks and some help, but I think you will get there with the right advocacy. RFK is certainly going down the right road, especially, talking to guys like Joel Salatin. You guys have a completely different food system than we do. So we're seeing 7 and 8%, inflation in our food here. You guys are seeing 2%. So, and that is because of you have a much more free market. and you have more access to food than we do. So um, one of your great programs is your 20,000 bird exemption limit. So you can process 20,000 birds on your own farm and sell direct to your customers through a USDA exemption. That one really helps the little guy kind of get in on the ground floor and make some money without making the incredible expensive things like we have to buy $1 million license to be able to buy the chicks. It doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't buy me any infrastructure or anything. It's just permission to buy a chick,
That's
from the government,
crazy.
right? So you guys have a lot more entry points and so you're seeing that. It's actually, I believe the numbers are actually starting to show that too in the US. A lot more people are interested in growing their own food, and your small farm industry is actually flourishing and growing. And Dorothy and I are part of the American Pastured Poultry Producers Association is a really great association. And it has grown tremendously in the last 10 years. Another one is like the Homesteaders of America out of Virginia. Like when we first went to a couple of those shows, there's 50 people there, and it was a wonderful little event. Well, now they're having thousands of people, and they've had to change venues 2 and 3 times now, and so you're seeing this huge resurgence in the USA of small farms, and it's wonderful to see. And I think, like you said, AI and technology is only going to help that industry even more.
Yeah, it is. It's encouraging to see people get more interested. So obviously, there's a long road ahead, but the trend seems to be pointing in the right direction slowly. So, and I want to be respectful of your time. You've already given quite a bit of it, but I do have just a couple of closing questions still. So getting back to how can a consumer ensure that they're making the best decision on sourcing their food. So and obviously it might be a little different in Canada, but in Arizona where we live in the mountains of central Arizona, and we have probably at least 3 or 4 small ranches within 50 miles of us. So if you
Yeah.
were to go out and try to say you have 15, 20 minutes to spend talking with the rancher and try to figure out which farm should I source from, what are a couple questions that you would ask the ranchers?
First, I would not come at it from the perspective of how to grow food better than the rancher. Um, I would just ask them and learn about their process. Just how do you do things? What do you believe in? What are your values? What can I expect when I buy from you? Those kind of things. Don't and if it works for you, great. If it doesn't, move on. I wouldn't want to get into the point of we have it sometimes with our customers. They might be really upset. Like one example is we use a bit of corn and soy, and I have my own reasons for using that because I don't want to import. I don't want to import grains. I don't want to support uh, global shipping, and I want to support my local neighbors. And my local neighbors produce lots of corn and soy, and so I use that in my feed. Some customers get really upset with that, but I also have the nutrition tests to back it up that show that it's not as significant as one might think. It's very significant in a closed system where they're inside a barn, but with our system where they're out on the pastures and the environment they're given, it creates a completely different meat, and we have the test to show that. But some customers, they get really upset at that. But I, if it works for them, it's great. If it doesn't work for them, same thing. I don't want people to there's only one way to do things. And I see that argument a lot of the times. And I think they do it partly for clicks and likes on the internet. But, you see that online where, you can only do it this way. Like I see a lot of hate for chicken on the carnivore pages too. But my chicken actually has almost 10 times the omega-3s that beef does. So I don't feel like the chicken should have as much hate as it does. And so people get really idealistic when they're looking for things. I think you should just take into consideration and learn what the farmer's process is. I not necessarily, do you grass feed 100%? Do you, are your animals pastured, 365 days a year? Are your, try not to get too idealistic and just learn and support your local farmer. And pick from the best, or what you think is the best, or what works for you.
Yeah, I love
Some
that
people
open-ended approach. It's kind of just the art of conversation, really. Like, what are your values? And then they get to decide what that means. I love that approach. So I just kind of to wrap up here, if you could leave our listeners with one principle or action that could strengthen both their own health as well as the health of the soil, what would that be?
It's very simple. Vote with your dollars.
Awesome.
That's it. Whatever you want the future to look like, you make sure that your money is spent on that, whatever that is. So if you want more Walmarts, you want more, that type of food system, more Costco's, go to Walmart and Costco. If you want more local small farmers who, are interacting with the land and they're, raising their children there and they're part of the community and their kids play the local sports and, then you need to be part of that system. Because if you don't do that, it's not going to exist anymore. So, Dorothy and I, we buy anything we can buy local, we do. So like even one example is our soap. Like we buy bars of soap from a local honey guy. It's like $8 or $10 a bar, and I think I can buy it for probably $1 a bar at Costco. So, but it doesn't matter.
I love that though, the principle. Put your money where your mouth is. I love that.
Yeah, like you can't if you what you want the future to look like, you have to put your money there. So, and then at the same time, we also need to put the pressure on our regulators and our politicians to allow us to spend our money the way we want to too. Because here in Canada, we're like our regulations are next level, and we can't grow what we want to grow, and I can't do what I want to do. I can't even pasture my animals together. That's illegal here. So, there's all kinds of crazy things that, we need to get the regulators that, regulations just kill small business. It's as simple as that. So you need to vote with your dollars more than anything. That matters so much.
Well, that is perfect advice, using your dollars to vote for what you want the future to look like. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Chad. This is wonderful.
Before we hop off, do you want to share with our listeners where they can find you on social platforms, your website, and even just a brief overview of the products that you sell from your farm?
Well, we primarily focus on a pasture-based system, grass-fed meats. So we do the beef, pork, and chicken. We really specialize in the chicken, and you can find us at www.ifarmfresh.ca, and that gets you all the information about us and where we are. We don't have much shipping available, but you can buy locally, and if you can't support our farm, I just really want people to support their local farms as well. So there's great organizations that help you find a local farm to support.
That's perfect. So we also very much encourage our clients to source their food as locally as possible. But let's, just in case that somebody can't find something locally and they love what you have to say, obviously we're in the U.S., so is there an opportunity to purchase from your farm, or is that not allowed given it would be crossing borders?
So with our farm, no. Maybe I'll move to the States someday. But no, the American Pastured Poultry Producers Association has a website. I think it's getrealchicken.ca. And it is a website that allows... .org. Oh. Wait, just a second. I better double check before I give somebody bad information. But,
fact check yourself.
We'll add the links as well when we publish the podcast.
GetRealChicken.com.
Perfect.
Wellness isn't black and white, so why should your choices be? On High Energy Life, we dig into nutrition, health, and science with an open mind, inspiring you to make choices that actually work for you. Our mantra: embrace nuance, ask questions, and always reserve the right to change your mind. Now enjoy today's episode. I'm your host, Carly.
And I'm your host, Alex.